Welcome to another episode of When Life Hands You Lemons. In this episode, I'm sitting down with Miss Valeska. She is the president and founder of Magic Haus Films, a film production company based here in Orlando, Florida. Last year, a couple years ago, I had the opportunity to first work with Magic Haus Films. They shot a coffee commercial here in Orlando, and they needed some music for it, so I composed the music for that commercial for them. And then about 6 months to a year later, I did an internship with them, a social media marketing internship, where I learned how to, schedule tweets, Facebook posts, create content for social media, as well as work on a few side projects they had, including working with audio and music, and even learning a little bit about how to film short films and explainer videos and marketing videos. I've known Valeska ever since I started working with her back in, I believe it was 2016, for that coffee commercial. And she was humbled enough to join me on the show here and talk a little bit about filmmakers, music videos, and the different kinds of social media content posts that you should be posting, especially with video. She also talks a little bit about how to become, if you want to get into filmmaking, how to get into that, some tips and tricks on what to watch out for when you're starting to work for a filmmaker, and things that you should keep an eye on, and things that should be kind of laid out prior to starting a project. So I hope you enjoy this episode with president and founder of Magic Haus Films, Valeska. Cool. So in this episode, I'm going to sit down with Miss Valeska. She is a filmmaker, freelancer here in Orlando. She's also an alumni from Full Sail. She has been doing a lot of freelancing within the film realm. She's been doing a lot of traveling out to Los Angeles, here in Orlando, even in Florida. So we're going to kind of talk about what are some of the expectations when you are going into a film project, whether it be a music video, whether it be a promotional video, a YouTube video, whatever it may be. We're going to kind of break that process down a little bit for you. So Valeska, if you just kind of want to start off the episode with telling us a little bit about yourself, what got you into filmmaking, a little bit about who you are, what types of projects you like to work on, all that kind of fun stuff.
Well, hi, I'm Valeska Freire. I'm originally Venezuelan, therefore you'll hear my accent. And yes, I'm a filmmaker, and I also see myself as a visual artist. I started becoming interested in film when I did my undergrad, actually in fine arts. I started taking a lot of classes on video art and film, which were two separate departments because we did the film with Filmstug, the analog stuff. And taking those classes, I became fascinated with classic film, experimental film. Mostly I started taking theory classes, and by the time I graduated, I knew what I wanted to do was focusing on this art. So I used to study in Boston, Massachusetts, at the School of the Museum of Fine Arts and Tufts University, and I traveled down to Florida to do my master's in film production at Full Sail, where I learned a lot of film, mostly on, in the entertainment industry, not so much just with an arts setup. So I've learned more about filmmaking, a process for mainstream work and cinema. So after I graduated, I started freelancing a lot, working in the local industry. And then I started Magic Haus Films, which is a local video production company that focuses on doing all kinds of film and video projects, actually. We do a lot of events. We do a lot of advertising and marketing videos, music videos as well. And we've done a few cinematic projects. And aside from that, I freelance. So I kind of do both things at the same time. And through my freelancing is that I get to travel, and I only freelance at this point for narrative work. I don't freelance to do advertising or like marketing, which is something that I do through my company, but it's not truly my passion. So yes, you can find me making films or series or things like that, but it's always narrative.
And what is, you said that you started Magic Haus Films. How long ago did you start Magic Haus Films? And tell us a little bit about Magic Haus Films. Where did the name come from? I've always been curious about that.
Well, Magic Haus Films was founded 3 years ago. The name, well, that was funny. When I started coming up with names, like I came up with like all the stupid names. And you know how they say like there's no stupid idea, but I wanted to play with the concept of magic, especially because in Central Florida we have Disneyland and their land of magic, and like people come here expecting that this is sort of like a magical place, and I kind of relate that to video because what you see in video most of the times is kind of surreal, a little magical. And then I wanted to incorporate the word film because it's what I do, but also to give people the idea of what we do. It's artistic, it's cinematic, because anyone can do video, but not everybody can do film. And then the term has, because we want to make it here, but we didn't want to play with like the American word, so it could like sound more, I guess, fancy. So we used the German term, and I kind of put all of them together after, as I said, coming up with like a lot of stupid ideas, and it kind of clicked. It kind of worked. I was a little worried at the beginning because it's kind of like a long name. It's 3 words. But at the same time, if it was shorter, it didn't really work. So I don't know, maybe 20 years from now, we'll reinvent our brand and just leave it as Magic Haus when everybody knows that it is about films. But if we did include the word films, I feel like no one was going to know what it's about because it's a new brand, People are not familiar.
Yeah, so you what are some projects? You said Magic Haus Films is 3 years old now,
yes.
About 3 years old. And last year I did an internship with you guys, social media. So, and during that time, you guys were working on a pretty big project, and you worked on a lot of projects during that 5 or 6 months that I was with you guys. What are some of the projects that you've worked on, and what have been some of your favorites, and what have been some of your least favorites? You don't have to name names, but what are some of the, like, why was it your favorite? What are some aspects of making it your favorite as to why you worked even harder than you normally do, and what are some projects that you just, like, you weren't feeling it, you're kind of like, when is it going to be over?
Okay, so I think usually my favorite projects are, with Magic Haus Films, as I said before, we focus on all different kinds of projects, right? It's not only narrative or cinematic. So we do a lot of advertising and marketing, which can be really, really fun and exciting, and it could be a creative process, or it could be kind of like boring and hard to make. So instead of telling you what's the nature of the project that I like, I'll prefer kind of tell you what clients I prefer to work with, because at the end of the day, to me, that's what makes the difference. I prefer to work with clients that trust the professional. So I've had clients that they're professional at their craft, and they want to come to us to market it, so they can have like a really good advertising to get to be known. And it is amazing when they come, give us their idea, their vision, but they let us do what we know how to do and how we do it best. And I love working with people that trust the professionals that they hire. Whether there's other clients that they have kind of like an idea in mind, but they want to be kind of like micromanagers with the professionals that they're hiring, and the process becomes boring because you are just kind of like just following instructions. And at the end of the day, working with those clients become this thing of like, I'm just only doing this project because I need the earnings or because I need to do more projects, and not something that you are doing it not only because of the earnings, but because it's fun and because you want to help them and because you really believe in the project. So at the end of the day, it kind of comes down to if the client trusts you or not. And, this is something that applies not only for advertising or marketing projects, it applies to music videos, it applies to cinematic film. It's amazing what people can do when they have like a solid conversation on what's their vision, what is their goal, but they also trust a professional because at the end of the day, that's what they came for, right? So, yeah, it comes down to the client to me, I think.
Okay, yeah, and I can agree to that as a freelancer I don't do filmmaking, but I can agree to like working on other side projects and writing and audio editing and stuff. It helps when they trust you. It definitely helps with the flow of the project. So you trusting somebody, especially a professional, when you're hiring a lawyer or you're hiring a filmmaker or you're hiring like a copywriter, why should they trust you? How can somebody that doesn't necessarily trust you can kind of sense that? How can you build that trust, or how can you get them to build that trust, especially in filmmaking?
Well, I think first, before hiring somebody, or I expect that before somebody comes and hires me, they've done a little bit of research. And I think nowadays everybody does that. That's why we have reviews online. That's kind of like what Google is for. So honestly, when you decide to go to a restaurant, to a store, most of the times you go online and do a little bit of research and learn, okay, what is this that they have to offer? How long have they been doing it for? What are they known for? So I think the first step is kind of doing that research. And after you kind of like segment out or filter the professionals or the other brands that you don't want to work with, you kind of like come up to your few options. And after those few options, I think having that first conversation and figuring out if there's chemistry or not to work together, it's very important. Now, a lot of times we have to work on projects with people that we don't necessarily have a lot of chemistry with, but that doesn't mean that you can't work together. That's when the factor of trust comes in. If I knew how to do, or if I was an expert in like all the writing, all the copyrights, all the special editings of my projects, I would just go ahead and do it myself. I wouldn't hire another person, but I want a project to be successful and be the best. So I think it's about establishing collaboration, about trying to work out the chemistry, if there it is or not. And as we were saying from the beginning, that trust comes not only from the research, but that initial conversation of seeing what can they bring to the table or not. I would never recommend somebody to hire someone else that doesn't know more than them in a specific area. Does that make sense? Like, I'm not going to go to a restaurant if there's a chef that can't cook better than I do, because otherwise, why would it go, right?
Just make it yourself.
Right. So I think that it kind of applies to everything, especially in this industry, where it's all about talents coming together and collaborating.
Yeah, and I work I contract with a music distributor, and we're always talking about expectations. So a lot of times people will come to us, or clients will come to us, and they'll want us to do this, this, and that. Well, we don't do this, this, and that. We do this, this, and this. So I think expectations is also a very important thing in that. So, for example, if somebody came to you and they wanted you to film it, but they also wanted you to do these crazy how do you say that? The CEG?
CGI.
CGI. Dyslexic. CGI. And they wanted you to do all these crazy other things, like doing all these different drone shots and doing like helicopter shots. And like, well, we don't do that. We don't have the funds. We don't have the resources to do that. But they wanted you to work. They wanted to work with you. How would you kind of work with that? Would you take on that client, or would that be somebody you would pass on?
Well, the first thing I would like to see if it's that idea really working, because a lot of time clients have like all these amazing ideas and you can kind of understand why they think that's going to work. But a lot of times it doesn't necessarily work for their end goal, which most of the times is like create brand awareness or like make people follow their content.
And you don't really need all that for something simple like that.
Right. A lot of times they think these things are also less expensive than they really are, because people underestimate craftsmanship. People most of the times underestimate artists and people that work in the entertainment industry, and they don't really put value in the amount of hours and craft that they put to what they do. So like, people watch these amazing Disney films and they think this is something that like can be done in a week, when there's been years. And when you go back to the credits, there's like hundreds and hundreds of people that collaborating in a project. So when a client comes and tells me, okay, this is the budget that I have, these are the resources that I have, which are very limited, and this is what I want, and they show you like a Disney example, they're underestimating the circumstances. Oh, and then I know what I'm going to say, it's cliche, but I think it's cliche because it is so true. So if you want something fast and good, it's going to be expensive. If you want something cheap and good, it's going to take time. Usually these kind of clients that have these overboard expectations, they also want the projects fast. And you have to let them understand that if you are able to work with their budget and resources, it's gonna take time. There's always something that either the client or you will have to sacrifice. And a lot of times, if it's budget, the project is gonna take more time. If it's time, the project needs to be very expensive. So, do I take these clients or not? I set them straight of what their expectations and resources are, and I tell them what I can offer. A lot of times I've had clients that come to me and tell me, hey, would like to do this 360 video, which is a service that we currently don't have at my company, but I am always happy to hire freelancers that work on that. So I tell them up front, hey, we can collaborate with other people to make this happen, but this is going to have an extra cost. And if they agree with that, we move forward. And if they don't, if they want things made fast and cheap, I just don't move forward with the project, because at the end of the day, not all is about money. There's also like your image that is going to be out there.
I was just going to say that, like, you don't want to take on a project and work on it, and then, you know, at the end of the project, the client says, well, I didn't get this, and that, so you only completed technically 70% of the project, you know, because you completed that 70%, but there's that 30% that you weren't able to deliver on. So I think that's important too, is doing that research and having that kind of a same vision, like doing your research on what you can do, what Magic Haus Films, for example, can offer, and then what they can't, and then kind of deciding whether or not if it's a company you want to work with, and also consulting with you to like get more information and say, yeah, we can do this. We don't put it on our website, but we actually do offer this because it's something we have to hire externally for.
Yeah, and as I said, having that conversation is so important, because a lot of times a client thinks that they will need a bunch of stuff that they don't really need. And at the end of the day, so there's this problem of their expectations are very big, but their budget is very low. But after having that conversation, they can understand, we could actually work with your budget. The result's going to be a little different from what you have in mind, but it's actually going to be more effective for what you want. So if they trust that you know what you're talking about, I think it's good to move forward. And the other thing I was going to say, a lot of times when freelancers take on a project that they don't really think is going to work or they don't really believe in, it's because of the money. Let's face it, freelancers need to, get work done so they can get by. But most of the times, these kind of projects, they don't even pay well. So it's for you to, make a balance and see, is it worth working so much on this project that it's not paying good and it's not good, or is it better to pass on and actually work on projects that are going to be helpful for me in the future, and their payment is actually going to be nicer,
Mm-hmm. So usually with higher budgets, do you see like more like micromanaging, or because they want to make sure that they're getting every single penny, or do you see more creativity, more freedom?
Actually, I see more creativity and freedom. And I think the root of that probably comes from the fact that they have trusted others in the past. And that's why what they are doing, it's working. So, and when I say trusting others, we have to understand that there's always going to be the opportunity for editing, for feedback. To my clients, I always offer them one edit opportunity, and then if they want additional edits, they can pay extra for it. But it's good for them to understand at the beginning, like, I'm going to trust you, but if something needs a little change, we can do it. And I love doing that, and I love feedback processes. So going back to your question, when clients come with bigger projects, to me, they're usually more trustful on you. They trust you more, they believe more in your vision, and they acknowledge there's going to be the editing process.
So we've talked about a lot of the projects that you've worked on and some of the things like budgets and expectations and researches and the researching that you need to do before you hire somebody like you or a company like Magic Haus, and building that trust, and also the creative vision. Like, is your style that you're looking for, is that on par with what the company can provide? Or like, for me, it comes down to like photography. Like when I did my senior pictures, I hired somebody, or I went with somebody that I liked their vision, I liked their style. And of course with photographers, there's all kinds of different styles. And with that, like, you wouldn't hire a photographer and say, oh, I want my pictures to look exactly like hers. Well, if you want your pictures like hers, then just go to her, type of thing. And I think that's important to, instead of setting that expectation and just doing that research and hiring the person that you want to work with. So now let's kind of move into why it's important that all this stuff kind of comes together, and why video has recently become king, like why YouTube is becoming so successful, why so many different social media platforms are pushing video content. And I think part of it is because a lot of today's younger generation, like the millennials and even younger, they don't have such a long attention span anymore to read posts. They would rather have somebody read it to them or explain it to them. So why should a company, whether it be a startup company or a company that's been in business for 20, 30 years, why is it important for them to hire a company like you or hire a freelancer like you to put out content, to make videos, whether it be an explainer video, whether it be an introduction video? Why is that important?
Well, I think that is important because, as you said, millennials and younger generations, we want to see videos for everything. Before we purchase anything, we don't only want to see the images, but we want to see how that thing performs. And I think the reason of why we want to see video, it's not necessarily because we don't have the attention span for reading. It's because in the same amount that you put in video, you can communicate so much more. Let's not forget the video is not only a visual medium, but it's an audio-visual medium. So if you're sending images, if you are sending audio, if you are putting colors and text through those images, there's so many messages that you are sending at the time, and you can accomplish the final message a lot faster than in the writing medium, for example. Now, I particularly love reading. I read so much books, and I love letting my imagination go. And at the same time, I love watching films, and I know that I love watching series. But I can recognize that when I'm watching a series, if it's 12 episodes, a lot of more content comes to me than reading a book of like 12 chapters. It's gonna take me a lot more time, and the information that I get fed, it's less. So I think that is the reason why video, it's so effective, because you can communicate a lot more in a fewer or in a less amount of time. Now, as I was saying, everybody's putting video out there. why would you not put it? You want to compete, right? So if people are going to watch the videos of their brands or whatever it is other companies have to offer, you have to compete with them. So you need that. And not only you need that, but you need to have that and you need to stand out. And that's when it comes the thing about like doing the research of what are your expectations, what is exactly that you want. But I think companies have to understand that at this point, there's no moving back. Like if you're not putting video out there, you're just basically left behind. Things are gonna move forward, and soon people are gonna be putting 360 videos for everything. Movie theaters are moving forward to having the 4D experience, so it's only gonna move forward from here. So if you are only putting out written content or photography content, even though it's probably great and it's good, it's just not enough if you want to compete.
To take that next step, you got to be doing video.
Correct.
And when you say video, that can be really any kind. It doesn't have to be professionally made. It can be like a live stream once a week. It can be a quick 1-minute explainer video or something, an update on how your week has been.
But, well, okay, so it's very interesting that you touch in this because this depends on what is your goal. If you are an artist or a person that is working on brand awareness, doing this type of videos of like updating your followers, telling them what you're doing during the week, doing behind the scenes videos that you're doing with your phone, it's great, it works because people are naturally interested on you, on learning about you. Now, if you're a company or a brand, my opinion is that you don't want to do that. You don't want to put out there a video that doesn't look professionally made because people would think that your product or service is not professionally made. So I would never advise a brand to do their own video content or their own audio content unless their professionals are doing that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to fabricate my own shoes because I'm not a shoemaker and I have no idea. Like, I can watch a video tutorial in YouTube probably about how to make a shoe, but let's be honest, my shoe is not going to be,
Because you're not that profession. You're not in that profession.
Be a bloody shoe.
No. So also, I think with video, it's also very important because when I watch a video, I'm watching because of somebody's personality. That's also very important. Why do you think that's important? And why like filming a 5-minute explainer video on something instead of writing a 5-minute or a blog post, they can do a video explaining it because that's also they can have that connection and that personality.
Well, as I was saying, for artists and for people that want to create their own brand awareness, that it's like their style. Their personality is their style. And the things that they do or the things that they like, it's why they have that amount of followers. That's why it's good for them to like keep repeating on that content. For example, if you follow like a cook on Instagram, you're gonna love when they put pictures of like of them cooking, their recipes, videos of them coming up with a new plate. But when they start putting pictures about like only their dogs or only their very intimate personal life, it's not going to work for their brand unless they are like the Kardashians. That it's a different type of personality that people follow just because they want to know about their lives. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think it comes down to the industry as well because there's like in the music industry, there's a few like artist management companies that I follow and I really, really love their branding. And they have the CEO or the founder is kind of the face of the company. And while he doesn't put out a lot of video content, I can see that he has a very solid personality. And I think a lot of people would connect with him because he's very transparent on his business, on the music industry, and kind of helping people. So I think it kind of depends on your industry as well. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. It depends on the industry. It depends on what exactly you are doing and what are your followers' expectations. And a lot of times, some people are very successful by managing their followers and by putting content out there. And there's other people that they're like absolutely successful at their craft and they don't care so much about the followers. Like recently I went to the Beyonce and Jay-Z concert here in Orlando. And after that, I learned that Jay-Z right now, he doesn't have an Instagram account. And it's like, oh, it's weird considering that his wife has like one of like the best Instagram accounts out there. It's like he can't care less and he doesn't need it because he's focusing only about like his music. So it depends on like what are your goals and how you want to interact with your following. Now, for brands and for companies, it is super necessary for them to have their style, their personality, their branding out there. If they don't have it out there, people are just not aware of their existence.
There's a company that comes to mind. They're a tech company that comes to mind, and they're fairly new. They've got maybe 100 employees or so, but I can see like for them, they are doing like tutorials on the software that they're working on and all that stuff, but I can't see them turning and like having the CEO or the president or like some of the executives of the company like doing Instagram live videos. Like it just would not work for them. And I can definitely see like how personal brands would come down. Like maybe if they had like a sub brand that they were working on or a brand that they had kind of outside of that maybe did focus on something different. But I can't see like the actual company as a whole like doing an explainer video through an Instagram live video. Like that just wouldn't work for that company.
You know what, it would work if this same company puts out their like YouTube tutorials on how they use their products, because people would naturally search for that. If you want to learn how to do something with a video, you go to YouTube. You're not going to go to an Instagram live stream.
Correct. Yeah, like a tutorial. And they are doing that. So let's see here. Personality, we talked about the personality of the industry, the faces of change. So we've talked a lot about projects that you've worked on. We've talked about, the video being king. When somebody comes to you, whether it be a musician, whether it be like usually let's aim for musicians. So when a musician comes to you and they want to shoot a music video, what are some of the expectations they should have for you? I know we've talked about this earlier in the episode, but what are some things that you do before you actually start working on the project, and what are some things that all musicians should look for before they're hiring somebody like you?
Well, as I said before, it's good to do the research. When they come to me, it's funny, I'm going to tell you the opposite. I'm going to tell you first what I do. The first thing I do is listen to the song they want to do the video for. Kind of like gather what is their style, what is this song about, what is the feel of the product they're putting out there. Then if it's a band or is like a solo musician, I look into their social media or their website and try to gather information of what's their look and feel, what's their message they want to put out there. And then when we talked, the first thing I think it is to like, do you want to represent on your music video the message of this song, or do you just want to put like another story on your music video, or just do something that is very random? And after we determine that, then we move to like, do you have ideas? What's your vision? Most of the artists, they already have like a vision in mind, and I love when they do, because at the end of the day they're promoting their product. So we talk about those ideas, kind of like break them down, and most of the times they're like pretty open. They know what they want, but they don't necessarily know how they want it, and that how is like when we come. So I work with those ideas and tell them how we can make them and what their expectations can be from that. And from there, the rest of it is just like making, working on the process, moving forward. But it comes down to them telling us their vision and to us telling them how we can create that vision to have these specific expectations. If it works for them, we move forward. And if it doesn't work for them, we don't. A lot of times the expectations work, the budget doesn't necessarily work, and that's when we as a company and them as a client need to be a little flexible and understand there's something always that needs to be sacrificed in order to make a product work.
Do you ever have clients, like whether it be musicians or whoever, come to you with very little ideas and they just say, I trust you, here's what I need to do, here's what I'm going to be talking about? And then they just give you very little information, like what do you do with that, and how do you kind of proceed with that?
Not so much. A lot of times when they come like that, it's because they kind of want to gather an estimate or a budget of what something would cost. But if they decide to move forward with you, they're going to be very specific most of the time. It's very rare for people to want to invest a good amount of money if they're not sure about what they want. So it's not very common.
Yeah, like I've heard horror stories of other musicians where they'll come to a filmmaker and they'll say, "I want a music video in the park with a muscle car," and that's all they give. And it's like, how am I supposed to work with that? Like, there's a million things we could do with that concept. So you just kind of have to sit and kind of milk it for what it's worth and just kind of see, like, what kind of muscle car, doesn't matter the color, doesn't matter the time of day, lighting, do you need, like, stunt people, all that stuff. You don't have that very often?
No, I don't have that very often. And also, before moving forward with the actual creation of the project, the client kind of like needs to approve the expectation that we presented to them. So with the little details, that's usually when the trust comes. Like, a lot of times they're not going to be as specific about how they want the lighting, how they want, like, what colors they want, what kind of models they want, but they're going to be as specific on what's a message that I want to accomplish, what is exactly what I want to show. But no, it doesn't happen often, because it goes back to the idea of, like, if people are going to invest money, they're usually solid on what is it that they want and what's their expectation.
They're not just going to just throw a couple $1,000s at you and just say, "Hey, here's what I want." That's it. Like, I just want that. I want to be in a park with a muscle car. Like, that's there's too much open-endedness on that.
Yeah, that never happens. I mean, I would love to have that, because it would be like a whole creative experience, but it just never happens. And if it happens, to be honest, I'll be like super concerned, because when the editing comes, it's going to be like a crazy party of expectations.
Yeah, and they're going to think that whatever you don't film, you can just do in editing. Well, maybe that's true, but that's going to cost a lot of time and can be a lot of money as well. So moving in, I mean, that's a perfect segue into the next question is, when you have clients that either have a really big budget or they have a really small budget, and preferably a small budget, because a lot of like indie musicians, I'm assuming that's who you work with, is a lot of indie people, kind of startups with not massive budgets. So how do you kind of work with that, where they want this, and this, but their budget is not going to cover this, and this? Like, how do you work with that? Do you just cut those services or kind of meld them in? Like, what are some things that you do to kind of work around that tiny budget?
Well, there's so many things to kind of like move around and work with those budgets. Like, for example, do you want to film in a private place? Do you want to film in a public place? Do you want stunts? Do you not? How fancy do you want your wardrobe to be? So, for example, here in Orlando, getting permits for filming are free. So it's really awesome, because as long as you get the paperwork done and you work with the film commission, you can get permits to work in public spaces, and you're not paying. Right. But here's the catch. If you want to put stunts, if you want to bring drones, you have to get some specific permits. You have to get some specific permits. Maybe you have to have police officers at your shoot, and those are extra costs that you need to add. So there's things of like, well, we can work outside without stunts and we can get a permit for free. Or instead of renting a super expensive location, maybe somebody that has like this awesome state house or ranch that we can film off, and then you're cutting off location costs. There's also like, I've had this happen in the past. I'm not a fan, but I've had a lot of clients, especially like with brands, that they're like, "Oh, I have a friend who is a makeup artist. I'm just gonna bring her to the shoot, so I cut the costs of the makeup artist." I don't necessarily recommend it, but it can work if the project is small. So I'm always happy like to find ways to like work around. Now, there are things that I believe should never be sacrificed. You never want to sacrifice your lighting. That is absolutely important.
I would agree to that, even as a photographer.
Right. You would never want to sacrifice the quality of your sound, because your image can be absolutely amazing, but if the sound is not working, the product is not going to work. And a good example to this, it's documentaries. You can watch so many documentaries where they are showing you like archival footage, security camera footage, crappy phone taken footage to accomplish a message, and you only stand to watch it because the audio is working. But if the audio and the visuals are not working, people are not going to stay. Or if the visuals are working but the audio is bad, people are not going to stay and watch. And I mean, I'm a visual artist, and I can still attest to that. So you don't want to sacrifice your visuals. I mean, you don't want to sacrifice your lighting. You don't want to sacrifice the quality of your sound. I would say you don't want to sacrifice your talent. And this especially applies to brands. Because if you're like branding yourself or you are the artist, obviously you're going to put the best of you out there. But if you are like a company that are putting out a promotional video, marketing video for your product, you want to make sure that you put some talent out there that is able to represent your brand, and not somebody like maybe that doesn't know how to talk in public, or that doesn't know how to act.
Is camera shy.
Yeah, camera shy, or that they don't have like a really good image, or maybe they have a great image, but maybe their image does not represent your brand. You know what I'm saying? So those are the three things I would never sacrifice. After that, you can work around production design, you can work around makeup, you can work around art, you can work around props, so many things. And then the other thing that I will say is that a lot of people sometimes come with like a small budget and they want to film like, I want to film in 6K, 8K, 4K. And that, adds doesn't necessarily add that much production value. It adds usually more costs to what you want. So what you're doing is an advertising video that goes to YouTube. You don't necessarily, or that goes to your website. You don't have to invest in cameras and the necessarily crew to operate those types of cameras. Maybe you can film in HD or 2.5K and get like a really good product still. Now, I'm particularly a fan of filming nothing less than 4K most of the times for what I do, but I can recognize that you can work with less than that. If your image and if your sound is working great, your product is going to work great.
Continue talking about the budget, because I think this is kind of a lot of, for me, it would be one of the bigger questions that I have that would kind of like, I would constantly think about, is it bad or good, depending on the project, to have a big or small budget? Like, it's always better to have a big budget, obviously, because you're going to have a lot more freedom in case you need to add something or whatever, you want to spend more time on something, you'll have that money. But it's not necessarily a bad thing to have a small budget either, correct?
It depends on the expectations of what you want and what you need. And also, it depends on how the budget is spent. Now, I already told you what are the things that you don't want to sacrifice, but I've seen clients or like even film projects with a big budget with which they could make really amazing things, but the way that the budget is used, it's not necessarily want to come up with a great outcome. So if you have a small budget, it also comes to that. How do you distribute that budget? For example, let's work a very, very like random number. Let's say you have $5,000 and you want to do, small budget music video. Do you want to spend $3,000 of those on a location because you absolutely want to work, I don't know, like with a park in the background, like with fireworks in the background? Or would you rather work smart, getting a more affordable location, and use that money to make sure that you're going to have good lighting, good visuals, good storytelling? So most of the times it comes to like, how do you use your budget? And I think you were right. Having a small budget, it's never going to be a bad thing. I think it's so much better that you have a small budget and you still want to do something than do nothing. I think there's a lot of artists that like they stop from creating content because they think that they don't have enough budget to do so. It's better to do something with less than not to do anything.
Mm-hmm. So another perfect segue into the next question would be, what are some things that artists or people that would, brands working on a budget, what are some things that, because they'll have a vision, they're like, I want this, this, and this. Okay, but you also have to remember, if you want to film this, these are the costs that come with doing it here or filming it using this camera or using this talent. What are some other things that people need to factor into a budget? Or what are some things that may be kind of almost hidden, like they're not like upfront, they're not like expected costs? What are some things like that should be factored into the budget?
Well, You will be surprised, but a lot of clients at the beginning forget about the post-production process. Like, they know it's there, but they kind of like think that after your filming day, that's kind of like what you're paying for. No, like half of the project is the post-production process, and it's incredible how much you can make with that, how much it can change. A lot of the times people forget that also in the post-production you can have different outcomes if you work with the original material or not. For example, if you're going to do a commercial or a film, you can use copyright-free and royalty-free music that is available for free online, and you can get a really good content. But chances are other films and other commercials are going to use that as well because it's free. Now, if you want original content, that's going to be one of those usually unexpected costs because you want to hire an original musician to write a score for your project, to write an original song. So that is one of the things that usually gets forgotten. Like on the editing process, special effects, the musicians that are needed in post. And for special effects, I mean, when you say special effects, the first thing that people have to come to mind, it's like explosions, green screens, putting like a big dragon on your commercial. A lot of times we put special effects and like very little things that people don't notice that are there, but are necessarily for them to be there. And this is other thing, it doesn't necessarily add an extra cost, but I think it's an unexpected thing. People believe that video works like Photoshop. So for example, you know how in Photoshop you can like edit a lot in image and make it seem like very different? Or like nowadays people have like apps in which they can manipulate their image, and they think that when it comes to a video, it's like that, and it doesn't work like that. And you know, it happens a lot with artists. I am familiar with like high paid or like super top, especially comes to actresses or like older actors, that they don't want to get close-ups with these 4K, 6K cameras because you can see like all the details on their face, and they put that up front in their contract. So the expectation that video can work like Photoshop and you can erase a lot of things like very easily and with little time, it's usually there, and it's unexpected when you tell them, no, it's not like that. This is what we shot. This is how we can work with it. Another thing, and this doesn't necessarily add an additional cost, but it's unexpected. A lot of times people think that you're going to get it in the first or on the second shot. If you want to make something good, you're going to get a lot of takes. And not only a lot of takes, you want to get like different angles. And especially, this happened a lot with artists that are like branding themselves. They think that the first time that they record it, it's going to work. It's not like making your homemade YouTube videos that are probably great and work great for your branding. But if you're doing a professionally made advertising video, we have to work it out until it comes great. And not only until it comes great, we also have to work it out for continuity. And it's not only like movement and action continuity, is wardrobe continuity, lighting continuity, the continuity on the things that you are saying. So a lot of times they don't expect that we're going to film a lot. They think that that only happens on like films or like TV series. No, it happens on commercials too. As a director, I want to repeat my take enough times until I get the good shot. Doesn't mean that I'm obsessed with it. I'm not the kind of person that does 30 takes. But if the first 3 didn't work, let's do another one. Let's do it until we get it. So I think those are the most unexpected things for clients.
Yeah, that's great, because I think a lot of times, especially with freelancers, like they just expect like, oh, you film and you edit and that's it.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more that comes into it.
What would you think are some of those unexpected things? And with music or with your experience with clients, what have you found?
I think like I'm gonna speak with music. I haven't done a lot of it, but I can foresee, for example, like if they're sending me a track to mix, and they want their vocals processed, like they want their vocals auto-tuned. That's a time-consuming process because you have to figure out what note it needs to be. You have to have the software to do it. I mean, there's cheaper software that you can do, but it's not going to sound as good as some of the top-of-the-line programs. And if you want to sound professional, then it's good to invest. I would also say, like, sometimes musicians or like people like me will be able to write, mix, and master. Not recommended, but because it's nice to get that second pair of ears on it, just to hear things that you're not hearing, especially because you wrote it. But for me, like, mixing it, like, you write it. So a lot of people that don't understand music, you just write the song and that's it. There's mixing and then there's mastering. Like, you have to get it to sound good, and a lot of people don't understand that.
And the editings that come with
editing,
it.
exactly. Especially, like, for example, with a podcast, even, like, they think you just come in, you record it. No, there's equalization, there's compression, there's gate, there's chopping and editing, and then there's even the mastering, getting it to sound at a proper level, so you don't have to turn your volume level up way in your car and blast it. So then when you go to the next song, it's going to blast your ears out.
Yeah.
You know, you have to get, that's what a lot of people, like, that's an unexpected cost for a lot of people in music.
You know, something that is an unexpected thing too, not necessarily a cost for the client, it's a cost for us artists and freelancers. You know, it's incredible the amount of money and time that we put into the tech things that we use. And a lot of it comes to software. Like, for example, at Magic Haus Films, we don't have 3 sound stages. We don't have a crane. We rent sound stages. We rent cranes. But when it comes to software, we have it all in-house. And a lot of people don't understand the amount of money and the amount of value that we have in the virtual stuff, in the software. Oh, yes, and this brings me back. Usually an unexpected cost for clients are hard drives. You have to have your main hard drive. You have to have your backup hard drive. And depending on how you want to shoot or how much you want to shoot, that's gonna, have a price. No, I always give my clients the opportunity of, like, if they want to keep, like, raw footage at the end of things like that, if they want to cut costs and they want to bring a hard drive for them to keep, I'm good with that. But usually with projects, that kind of, like, is a cost that comes with it, and people do not expect it. They are not thinking that virtual space costs money, and it does. And this could lead us to currency conversation, which we're not going to have, but I'm just kind of, like, leading people into the future. Virtual space, it's like, it's becoming real estate.
Mm-hmm. It is. And even, like, the computers that you use, like, you have to have a high-end computer to do this. Like, you wouldn't want to go to Walmart and spend $300 on a computer and edit 4K footage on it. It would be impossible. It would take you years to get that footage edited. So you have to have a high-end computer, and that costs money to keep that maintained. And if it breaks, you got to have that kind of money to work on stuff like that.
Yeah, and the amount of softwares, like the musicians, the audio editing
plugins.
The plugins, yes, the LUTs for color correcting. And then in order to, like, finish a project, you ended up using, like, 10 different softwares. People do not realize that.
People don't. Like, you can, like, for example, if you're going to purchase, like, some of the top of the line audio plugins are, like, Isotope, Ozone, and you have, like, the Waves bundle, which can be run upwards of $8,000 for all of the, like, compressors and gates and EQs and reverb plugins, and all that stuff can be $8,000 for that one bundle, given it's every plugin they've ever made. But still, it's expensive. Like, even Isotope's Ozone can run you $700. You have virtual instruments like pianos and strings and horns that can cost you thousands of dollars. It really, audio interfaces, you have to have quality stuff, and a lot of people don't understand that.
And the funny thing is that freelancers and artists, they don't charge for that, because you need to have that to do your work. That's what I'm saying. This is an unexpected thing that doesn't cost extra money for the client.
It's more of a back-end cost for us to work.
Yes, but it usually surprises the client. Like, a lot of times when I'm doing editings. By the way, a lot of times I hire editors for projects, but there's other projects that I like editing myself. And when I do that and clients sit with me for the editing, when they see the amount of softwares that we have on the computer, they're like, wow, I didn't know you could have all these. And I'm like, they have no idea how much this costs. It's like having your garage with, like, 30 fancy cars. Well, we have, like, our menu in a computer with all of our software. And I give so much value to that,
And I don't think it's, like, an upfront cost for people, but I think it's like I said, it's more of a back-end cost. Like, why are my prices the prices they are? Well, that's because I had to invest X amount of dollars into doing this so I could take projects and clients on like you. You know, I had to purchase the software, I had to buy the computer, I had to buy this piece of hardware, I had to buy this, and that. And that all costed, say, $10,000. That's why I charge what I charge, to make up for that.
And the time, people think...
Exactly, my time
rendering.
as a professional, rendering. And because that time that's rendering, I can't use my computer because it has to render that project.
Well, and you have to be there.
And you have to be there.
Yeah.
Like you can't be working on other projects. So that's a lot of information. Let's talk a little bit about people that want to become filmmakers, people that want to work in film that have... Because a lot of people, it's so easy to whip out an iPhone, and film a 4K video of, say, a music video. Like, what are some tips and tricks for people that want to get into filmmaking and people that want to kind of do what you're doing?
Well, first I'd like to say that there's nothing wrong with wanting to film with the phone. It's incredible the amount of tools that we have, the good quality of image and sound that these phones can give us. Like I right now have the iPhone X, and every time like I'm watching something with it, I'm like fascinated with it because I really put value in the image of this screen. So there's nothing wrong with that. You don't need a super fancy camera, a super fancy crane, a super fancy lighting device to create something good. But you need to know, I think you need to know how to light, how to make sure that sound is coming up good, how to tell the story for it, to make it work. But now that I said that there's nothing wrong with wanting to film with your phone or with your DSLR camera, I would say that for new filmmakers, I want them to know that there's gonna be a lot more paperwork in your process than you think. It's incredible the amount of stuff that has to happen in writing for a project to happen. First, obviously you want to negotiate what you're doing. You want to have a script to make a story, or even like for music videos, we make scripts for it. Even if it's narrative or it's more documentary style, there's different types of scripts that we do. We film the process, but in order to film, you have to have releases for everything. You have to have releases for everyone. You have to have permits for everything. You have to have writing notices for everyone. You have to have call sheets for everyone. If you're working union or non-union, you have to have time-in cards, time in, time out for actors, time in, time out for crew. You need to have payroll information. You have to have personal information. There's so much that happens in writing that for people that want to work in producing specifically, or maybe they don't want to be necessarily producers, but they want to produce their own projects, they need to account for time for that. And they need to know that it's not going to be fun. A lot of times it's going to be very boring, but it's absolutely necessary. You have to have all your paperwork on file, fully done. You want to have everything in digital. You have to make sure that everything you talk or negotiate, it's in written. Even if it's a follow-up email, you want to have evidence of everything. So the first thing I will say, a lot of your time is going to be with paperwork, and it's absolutely, absolutely important. There's things that come to paperwork that can delay the process. Such little things, such as, for example, a lot of time actors or entertainers, they use artist names that are different from their picture ID names. And they sign their contracts with their picture ID names. I'll say it again. They sign their contracts with their artist name, but when it comes to processing their payroll, you have to have their picture ID name, and you can't find it. Or sometimes their picture ID name is absolutely different, and then they didn't put it on their contract. So how do you send the payment to this person? This type of little things can delay the process so much of a producer. So it's good for people to know in advance that there's going to be artists with different names. It's a good practice to have them write their picture ID name and their artist name in their contract. It's a good practice for you to know upfront who they are, so that way this process, doesn't get very delayed. What else I would like to let them know? Things that will delay the process too. I'm thinking about like the little tiny things that become a problem on set is things such as like people diet restrictions or like food allergies that they could have in a film set. It's so important for producers to gather that at the beginning, because when you're catering a film project, if you don't have what everybody needs, it can become a big deal in the process. Another thing that I would tell other filmmakers, one of the reasons it's important to always keep a good working ethic and always try to do your best and work hard. It's because in this industry, sadly as it sounds, everybody behind the camera is dispensable. If you look at very successful TV shows, you will notice that most of the times different directors direct the episodes. So even the director you can replace. You cannot replace is the actors, which can become a problem if your actors are not happy. So my message here is like, you always want to keep the talent happy. And if you don't want to be replaced on set, you always have to work and be your best, because everyone is replaceable. And I've seen it so many times in different film sets. I've gotten to travel a lot, most of the times working in indie filmmaking. And I've known a lot of crew members from New York, from California, from here in Florida. And it's always really nice when I see the same people coming back to a project. And usually the common trait that they have is that they're consistent. And I've seen so many people working with production companies that they work one time and they never come back.
Mm-hmm. That's really good. And another thing that came to mind was when filmmakers are starting out, somebody, whether they're fresh out of school or they just got their first camera for Christmas or their birthday, that you don't have to have the most expensive camera to produce quality content. And I think a lot of musicians think that they need to have the best speakers, they need to have the best audio interface, they need to have the best microphones, they need to have the best everything to produce a quality record or produce a quality song, EP, whatever it may be. And that has to, I'm sure, translate to the film industry, to filmmaking. You can get a camera, a cheap $200 point-and-shoot camera at Walmart, and learn to use that and produce quality content with that. Learn how to work the camera, learn how lighting works, learn how to record sound properly, and you can then move up and get nicer gear, but you don't need to spend $10,000 to start out. Learn the basics and learn how to do it well before you spend all kinds of money. Would you agree to that?
I would absolutely agree to that, and that's one of the reasons why when you go to a film festival, you will see films that were done with iPhones and films that were made with Red cameras, and they are all playing in the same categories or in the same festival. They are valuing is the craftsmanship and the storytelling. And I would also tell, for this industry in particular, for people that are working on bigger projects or people that want to freelance a lot, is that most of the times production companies budget for the renting of gear. They don't own any of the gear. This is why renting companies are so successful. A lot of times you will see directors of photography or cinematographers that maybe have some of their own lighting and cameras, but most of the times all of these things get rented. So a lot of times you don't have to invest that much. You want to invest to do your own projects and to do your things, but don't invest $30,000 in a camera if you want to work being part of a film crew for a big project. I will say though that I do see this a lot. Most of on-set sound mixers, they have their own gear all the time. That's probably the one crew member that has their own gear. Everyone else rents their stuff, and it's okay because film production budgets for that. So there's no need for people that just graduated to invest thousands and thousands of dollars. First, because most likely you don't have it. Second, because the productions, most of the times, they're not going to need you to have it. And third, technical equipment becomes obsolete so fast. If you bought a 2.5K camera 2 years ago, guess what? We're filming at 8K right now. So that really big investment, it's not, it's funny because I was saying minutes ago that our software, it's like real estate. It is, but it also becomes obsolete. It's a real estate because our value is in there, but it's like cars. Think about it with cars. Years pass and they lose their value. So I would absolutely agree with you. You don't need the most fancy equipment to start with. I will say put more attention in the craftsmanship and the story and the message or the tune that you're trying to make.
So that covers it for everything that I have. We talked about everything from budgets to projects to not spending oodles amount of money on your projects. So thank you for all of your information and your input and your tips and motivation to future filmmakers and people who want to hire people like you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
So where can people follow up with you and contact you and reach out with any questions and maybe even want to work with you?
Well, if you're local to the Orlando area and you have any projects, you can visit magichausfilms.com to learn more about the services that we have to offer. But if you want to learn a little bit more about me or what I've been doing, you can look me up on IMDb, Valeska Freire. And my most current project that you can watch online, it's a crime series called Bronx SIU. You can watch it on Amazon Prime or UMC channel. I co-produced that project, and I'm sure you'll find other content online, but that was the last thing that I've been working on. So if you are into New York City, into crime stories, into police drama, you're going to find a little bit about that in there. And you can follow me on Instagram. Just look up my name. I'll pop up. And I love to be in touch with people. Usually, like, giving talks in the Orlando city. I love to connect with others. I love to collaborate. I love to learn about new filmmakers, people that are graduated from film school that want to collaborate in projects. I put a lot of value on people that want to learn that doesn't necessarily have like 10 years of experience. I can always work with them. And I don't know, just hit me up. I'll be in touch.
Yeah, and I'll put all of your information in the show notes as well so it can be easy to find you on the interweb. So thanks again for your time and your knowledge. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure the listeners will as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of When Life Hands You Lemons. I hope that you enjoyed my conversation with Miss Valeska. She is such a good friend of mine and a very talented filmmaker and is working on a lot of big projects. I'm very excited to see what kind of content and film she produces in the future. If you would like to support this podcast for future episodes, please see the show notes below. It has a link to Patreon, which is where you can support this show financially. I would also recommend that you sign up to the mailing list as well as follow me on social medias so that you're aware of when new episodes are live. If you or someone you know would be a really good guest for the show, please let me know and send them the guest request form below. Thanks again for listening to this week's episode with the talented Miss Valeska. I will see you next week on When Life Hands You Lemons.